Hello and welcome to the tactical preview for the Champions League final between Inter Milan and PSG in a very much anticipated game between two of the biggest powerhouses in European football this season. They have Both teams have treated us to the best and most fun games I've personally watched this season in the Champions League and in their respective leagues as well. And they are two very interesting sides to watch as well. We're going to be going through every single aspect, not just tactically, of course. We are going to have a tactical focus in this video, but we're going to go through a number of different aspects as well that will be decisive and will determine in the end who is going to come out the winner in the Champions League final. Of course, these are all predictions and these are all things I have seen personally, but of course, I'm more than happy to. Both sides have gone through a very difficult path to get into the final. Of course, it's a Champions League final. From PSG defeating all three of the best Premier League sides and be proven wrong in some aspects and learn a lot more when I watch the game at the end, which will be next Saturday, of course. In England this season, from Liverpool to Aston Villa to, of course, Arsenal in the semi-final, or Inter, who treated us to maybe the best two games in the Champions League this season against Barcelona, or defeating, of course, Bayern Munich in the what was the quarter final. So we're gonna go through a lot of aspects, of course, tactically. We're gonna begin with each side's respective build-ups. So how each side builds up from the back and how each side presses from that other team's build up from the back as well. We're going to begin with PSG's build up, how they start their attacks. Um, I don't like to really emphasize too much on numbers, but it's of course important to just bring some type of perspective in how each team tactically are set up. So we've got PSG building up in a 4-2-4 or 4-2-1-3, however you want to say it. And on the other side, Inter normally build up with a 3-1-4-2. Now, Inter are quite, let's say, versatile in how they press, and they are reactive. And that's not a bad thing. That just shows that they react to the opponent's or how the opponent builds up. So let's explain. If PSG normally press with, build up with two defensive midfielders or two number sixes, that means they're gonna be left with one player between the lines, between the defensive and midfield line of Inter Milan. If there's only one player there, if there's only one player there, which is that attacking midfielder of PSG, then all that Inter does is put a player on that player. But let's say this defensive midfielder or this player in general, if it's Fabio Ruiz or João Neves, goes into that last line too, that means they're only gonna use another player in that defensive line to play a 3-2, okay? 3-2-4-1, and it changes. So let's not get too complicated because we are going to talk about what actually happens or what I've seen from a tactical perspective. PSG use a very interesting, but I think it's a well-known tactic of having this left back, which is of course Nuno Mendes. Most of the time you see both fullbacks starting positions be quite high, okay, to get the man marker behind him high as well for the centre back to have more time on the ball, okay. But PSG use a different strategy where they've got Nuno Mendes in a very narrow position. Now this narrow position drags, of course, the player that man marks him. What does that mean? This means that they're looking for a certain space, of course, that they are looking to create. What is the space? It's this space right here. If it's, of course, if but or not if, it's when this left back or the left back drags into a narrow position, then the man marker is dragged with him, then this space appears. Okay, so let's get into some clips to show what exactly I'm talking about. Here you see the starting position of Nuno Mendes. Okay, you see his starting position. He's not high and wide, so he's not around here, which means Saka can't can't go into this invalid space because there's no one there, so he's dragged into this position, which leaves a very, very big gap between the winger, or in Inter's case, it's the wing back of Dumfries, and the full back, of course, or the centre back, depending on the team. But for Arsenal's case, it's the winger and full back, which leaves a big space between both sides. And in the game between Arsenal and PSG, they used Kvara, which is the winger for PSG. They used him quite a lot. They used him a lot between Kvara and Timber to win those duels, or grab a foul, or or maybe combine with a midfielder. But at the end of the day, what I have seen at least is, I think, from how Inter presses from the build up, I think that they're going to lose the ball a lot. So what happens, or what has happened from the semi-final between Arsenal and PSG, is that they played a lot of long balls. PSG played a lot of long balls from Arsenal pressing man to man. So I think this is what I expect. I think they're going to play long. Or if they play those short passes, they're going to have to be a lot more versatile. So what do I mean? Very quickly, going back to the tactical pad. PSG don't have a lot of versatility in how they deal with man-to-man marking. So Inter, for example, use their center backs, they use 1-2s, they use a lot of different ways in how they get out of built-up situations. So, for example, you can see if the ball is with the center back right here, he can play the ball into the wide player, and he himself can drag into these positions. So they're not rigid in their positions, they're fluid. So this is the main difference between Inter and PSG in the built-up situation. So I do see, in my opinion, in regards to PSG's build-up, that PSG is gonna lose a lot of duels in the build-up. Or maybe if they do use this tactic that I've just mentioned, which is isolating the winger, which is probably going to be Kvara, against Bisek of Inter. This could be a tactic to win fouls, not necessarily creating a chance, which is primarily what they did against Arsenal. So I think this is going to be a main tactic, and of course there could be another scenario of them trying to build up by the thing that I just mentioned as well, which is being versatile. So sometimes what they do is they bring Vitinha into this position, which is very unorthodox. Let's leave out these lines so we don't get too fussed. So if Vitinha drops into this line, he doesn't drop into this midfield line to receive the ball for necessarily, but if the ball is played into the left back, he then, which is Vitinha, can't really be marked because he's in a very unorthodox position. So what happens is he actually makes this run here, which then means he's free. Why is he free in this position? Because the forward players that presses don't necessarily, or maybe 8 times out of 10, if a player makes the run from the back line into maybe the midfield line, they don't track back. So this happens, or this has happened a lot, and I've seen this, of course, with Inter. Inter is the best team to really to go off this type of tactic. Of course, this is an example that maybe has not worked. This exact example didn't really work, but you can see Vitinha dropping in here with Nuno Mendes, this time going high and wide. Nuno Mendes takes the ball, receives the long ball into here, and you can see Vitinha's run here. Saka is not able to track back if Nuno Mendes plays into Vitinha. Saka is not able to track back at enough speed. Maybe his reaction skills is a bit too slow. But if that pass is played earlier, then he is left to be free. Okay, so this is another tactic that could be used, of course. Maybe they have to be rehearsed, of course, from PSG. But in my opinion, from PSG's point of view, when building up, I think they're going to have a lot of trouble. So in my opinion, they're going to have to go long. Maybe, of course, I think they're going to play Dembele as a false nine. So maybe they could use him to play those balls in behind the back three, because there could be a couple of spaces or a lot of spaces in that back three for Inter. So of course we're going to go through the other aspects, but in my opinion, PSG are going to have some trouble when facing Inter's press in the build-up. Moving on to now how Inter build up against PSG's press. We're gonna work on or talk about two aspects, two very, very important aspects. Now, first of all, Inter, in my opinion, is the best built-up side in Europe. They are so, so versatile. Each player can occupy different positions and different roles in the team, although it may seem or look unorthodox or look quite unorganized, but it just makes them so very dynamic in how they set up or start their attacks. So let's start with Inter first, and then we're going to talk about a very, very important aspect for PSG that could hinder how they press as well. So Inter build up, as you see, in a 4-2-2-2 or 4-2-4, however you want to say it, with PSG pressing more often than not with a 4-1-4-1, which causes a lot of problems. Why does this cause a lot of problems? Because of this player right here, which is the free man. Okay, so let's just leave this as a thought, and we're gonna go back to it as how PSG find a solution for this free man. Now, Inter, as I've mentioned a couple of minutes ago, use their center backs and their midfielders in very, very different positions and in a lot of different ways in how they build up their attack. So let's say this center back has the ball, for example, then he plays into the left back or left wing back, which is of course Di Marco. Most teams either plays back into the center back, and the center back maybe plays long into this forward, or maybe the center back plays it into that defensive midfielder, for example, and he plays it back, and you see a very, very, in my opinion, negative build-up, which leads in the end to long balls, because physically teams right now are at the peak, at its highest peak. All teams now are very, very physically at a high level, which means you can't really play into these deeper positions, into these defensive midfielders. So now building up from the back needs a lot of dynamism. It needs a lot of versatility in how you build up. And Inter is what I've just described to a T. Why? Let's go into the clips right now. So I'm going to show you 3 different types of ways Inter And this is not the only three, by the way. This is just three examples that I picked out. So here you see, let's begin. Goalkeeper has the ball. He plays right into the left back right here. As you see, Barcelona here presses man to man. They don't really leave a man free, right? DeMarco has the ball right here. He plays into Mkhitaryan here. Now, as I've just mentioned, most teams in Europe, if not all, if Mkhitaryan has the ball there, he most of the time loses the ball. Most of the time he does lose the ball, or maybe wins a foul. Very similar to how PSG used Kvara against Arsenal in the semi-final, where the ball is played into Kvara right here, but he just wins a foul, which is not bad, by the way. It's maybe described as a successful build-up, but at the end of the day, what the biggest target is for a team building up from the back is you try and create a goal scoring chance in the end. So this is why Inter are very, very impressive here. So the ball is played into Mkhitaryan here, and DiMarco continues his run. Now, it's of course really, really risky, but he continues his run, and Mkhitaryan turns and plays right back into DiMarco. It looks really, really simple, but of course, it's not. This is another example where Bastoni has the ball, plays into DiMarco. DiMarco plays into Mkhitaryan again. Now he's pressed. This is now a psychological factor. Why? De Jong here knows that DiMarco is going to continue his run, right? So now he's between two minds. Is he going to fully press is he going to fully press Mkhitaryan, or is he going to maybe back out to mark DiMarco's run? Now, being in two minds during this stage of the attack is not, of course, right, which means Mkhitaryan is able to dribble past him and still play into DiMarco at the end of the day, and the pass at the end was not perfect, but you see my point. The third, of course, example is something that we see very often, which is Bastoni playing into DiMarco, and again he continues his run, and he opens up a lot of spaces for Inter to continue their attack at the end. So these are three very, very, very big examples in how Inter continue to impress in their build-up play, and I think it's going to cause PSG a lot of problems. Now, this is for Inter's point of view. Moving on to PSG. Now, we mentioned that PSG have a problem in having this free man right here, and how how PSG is able to find the way to not have this player be free in the build-up stage. Now, what they usually do is have Hakimi, which is the right back, have Hakimi or the opposite fullback, play or go narrow into this position to mark the free man, which means it's switched from a 4-1-4-1 to a 3-2-4-1, which is very, very similar to how Inter press as well. But what's the problem with this? The problem with this is, let's go back now to the clips. As we see here, this is Aston Villa's goal. I think it was the first goal against PSG, which nearly marked their comeback in the semi-final, or quarter-final, sorry. Pau Torres has the ball here, and you can see here that Hakimi is pressing the opposite player right here, so he's pressing the midfielder right here. It's not a problem until you have the fullback in that same position. That fullback in that same position make a run. Now, runs are really, really important in this stage, because that run is what makes, again, like De Jong in that last clip, be caught between two minds, because Pau Torres can play into, of course, Digne, who's the left back for Aston Villa, which makes him caught in two minds, and that man is once again free, which at the end of the day is ended with a goal. Again, let's go into another clip which shows how PSG press. You see the 4-1-4-1, but this time it's successful with Hakimi winning the ball against McGinn right here. Now, of course, if you play right into the press, which Aston Villa, I think, amateurly does, is quite poor, then Hakimi can be aggressive and win the ball. But if you use movement around Hakimi, it could very well lead to maybe openings for Inter. So, really, summarizing this whole section about building up, I think Inter have a very, very big advantage in this situation, and they could really use all these strengths. And I haven't even mentioned how they use their forwards and third man combinations, of course, to create chances, even in the build-up situations. So I think they have a lot of things to work on to really be successful in this stage. And of course, it could be proved decisive. Yeah, this kind of aspect could be decisive for the final, and you never know how they're going to score their goal. It could be from these type of situations. But at the end of the day, I think Inter have a very big advantage, and they really do need to use it because the other aspects are really, really close between both sides. We're going to be talking about how each team works in the mid block to mid to low block, transitions, set pieces. Now, this is where maybe it's maybe a little more even. But I think in regards to the build-up, I think Inter has an advantage pressing-wise, and they have an advantage on the ball as well. So on the ball, out of possession, I think they have a very big advantage in the build-up stage. Moving on to another really, really important aspect, I think could be one of the biggest factors in maybe one of the teams having an upper hand, which is each side's respective mid to low blocks. Now, we're going to start with PSG because they've got very similar issues from their build-up transitioning into their mid block, which is the other fullbacks dropping into the midfield to press the extra man. Now, let's just explain this issue very quickly. When a team has an extra man in between the lines, so in between the defensive and midfield line, which let's highlight him once again, which is this player right here. Let's highlight him very quickly. This player right here. This leaves a lot of issues for, let's talk about PSG here, for PSG. Now, maybe sometimes you have this center back right here, like in between half space, so he can maybe, if that center back plays into the free man, he can be aggressive and press him. But for Inter's sake, or for Inter's point of view, they have two forwards, though, so both center backs are occupied. So what does this leave PSG to do? It leaves this fullback to drop into this position in the mid block. Now, why is this an issue? Let's go into a very important clip, which again, it's for PSG's game against Aston Villa. Now, Konsa has the ball here. He plays into Pau Torres, and you see Hakimi's positioning right here. Now, this does not materialize into what I'm explaining here. Of course, at the end, the ball, Pau Torres plays a ball into I think that was Asensio. But let's just talk about the space that is left here. If you see my arrow here, I think you see it quite clearly. This space that is left because of Hakimi going into a very narrow position is very, very dangerous, and it's extremely dangerous for a team when facing a team like Inter Milan that play with wing backs. This is a let's highlight this once again. This is an extremely dangerous space that Inter could exploit. Once again, this is of course with movement, so they need movement around Hakimi, so they could deceive Hakimi into maybe doing one movement. So maybe the winger, or not winger, forward makes a run, so he's dragged into these type of positions, and this ball right here into this position, into the wing back, into DeMarco. It's really important to use this, because I think, like, I'm not too big into just stating uh, or saying that this is actually going to happen, but I think this is a very good tactic for Inter to use. They need to use movement around Hakimi and use this narrow position of that fullback to play wide. Now, let's just say that this is Marquinhos we're going to talk about here, the center back that has to push into these situations and cover Hakimi, which is, of course, he's a good centre back in my opinion, but he's not the most quick and he's not the most agile. So when facing a player like DeMarco, it's not going to be this easy. I'm not even talking about 1v1. I'm talking about the quickness in how Inter transition from playing into a mid block to seconds, having runs behind. You've got that the wing back, of course, Dumfries going into very high positions, and that can cause, in my opinion, PSG a number of problems, which is, of course, Hakimi's movement. I think it's something that Inter could really exploit, in my opinion. Moving on to Inter now, and although they are a fantastic side, of course, and they've got a lot of positives in their game, like we've mentioned in their build-up, and we're still going to mention their set pieces, how strong they are physically, how strong they are in transitions, they have got a lot of problems in their out of possession shape too. Now, I think it's been kind of a myth. Let's just talk about this season specifically, about how Inter are a traditional Italian side in regards to when they want to defend, or want to get into their low block and preserve a lead. I think it's been kind of a myth. Now, Inter, I don't think have been this good defensively, and I think Inter themselves, along with, of course, Inzaghi, could say this too. Now, this is not me talking. This is both games against Barcelona talking. They were in 2-0 leads, of course, in both games. We can talk about how even in the league, how they bottled, or let's not say bottled, how they threw away the lead against Lazio in the penultimate game in the league to what could have been them winning the Scudetto. They were, of course, in the lead against Lazio, I think twice, and they threw it away 2 times. Of course, losses against AC Milan, who are not by any stretch a superior team to Inter. This is, of course, the league talking and the Champions League. However, they have shown on a number of occasions this season that their out of possession shape can be exploited a lot. Now, why is this the case? In my opinion, although the 5-3-2 has its flaws, or has its positives, it does have its flaws too. And my biggest issue with the five at the back is that the fact that they do have 3 players in that second line. Now, of course, we all know why they do this, why they play with 3 players in the second line. It's to have both Thuram and Martinez in the front line to, of course, play off of in counter-attacking situations, but it does leave them short a lot, or a number of times in their out of possession shape. And I think it was really emphasized against Barcelona how they can be pulled apart with a simple like combination or movements in and around the midfield three. Now, let's just explain. When you have this midfield three of Inter, And most examples we're gonna be talking about here is gonna be against Barcelona, because I think the theme of the game between PSG and Inter is gonna be very similar to Barcelona and Inter as well in the semi-final, which is Barcelona had most of the possession, of course, and Inter at most of the time as well were defending more in their out of possession shape and trying to transition into counter-attacking situation. So I think this is going to be a very general theme into this game. However, I think even if PSG score first, I think it's going to be the same theme, because at the end of the day, this is how PSG's style and Luis Enrique's style of play is. They want to have the ball, they want to dominate possession, and Inter are not that type of team at all. And that's their strength, and I actually admire that. I admire that they know their strengths and they play to their strengths. They don't they hide their weaknesses in that style of play, so that's not a problem. My problem is having this midfield three means most of the time when we're playing into one side of the pitch, like the ball is here, we're playing PSG, or PSG's player on the ball is Nuno Mendes, or the left back here. Most of the time most of the time they shift, so this back five shifts into these positions here. So the left wing back shifts here. So the midfield three also shifts now. I think we don't need these lines anymore, so we can leave them out so we don't get too... Okay, so naturally when the ball is on that left hand side or on one side, the other team shifts. The problem is, and PSG have got a very similar shape to Barcelona, they play with a midfield three who are very technical and are able to occupy different positions on very different occasions. So I think it's very, very similar. Let's move into the clip first, and now and get back to the tactical pad next. Okay, so the ball here is played into here. I think it's I don't remember the name of the Barcelona left back. It's played into the left back here, and you can see now Barella and Dumfries. Now this is a big issue, a big systematical issue as well, where you can't have in a five at the back system two players pressing one on the ball player. That's a big problem. Why is this a big problem? Because that means you're a man short in the midfield. Going back into the tactical pad, so let's say this is the Barcelona left back. If you're having this wing back, this is the wing back, press the left back, which is not an issue at all. You can't have the other midfield player next to him too. Why is that the case? Because if we're talking about this example here, then you've got one player who can be marked, you've got this midfield player that's not marked, and then you've got an extra midfield player that could not be marked as well. Why is he not marked? Because football, as I've mentioned at the start of the video, is just not about numbers. It's not all about numbers. So yes, when we're talking in this board right here, we're talking about this defensive midfielder of Inter. That's not a problem. He's gonna mark him. But in the example here, let's move on into the example. It's played behind Mkhitaryan. Now, as I've said, when the teams actually talk about before or pre-game, they talk about in certain situations, you're going to man mark, you're going to zonal mark, you're going to press this player. Of course, it's very simple and easy. But at the end of the day, moving back into this tactical pad, this is an opposite pass. Of course, this is a reverse pass, or not opposite pass, this is a reverse pass. So the issue actually is, the issue stems from the gaps that you leave when you play with a three-man midfield. Now, let's just talk about Mkhitaryan's position here very quickly and why he can't press. I think this is Dani Olmo, if I see correctly. I think it is Dani Olmo. Why he can't fully press Dani Olmo. Now, you see the space that Eric Garcia has here. This is another very, very big problem of having 5 players in the defensive line, while also having 3 midfield players. This is a big, big problem, is that switcher play here. It's very, very simple to play that switch into Eric Garcia. Now, this is why Mkhitaryan can't really, of course, can't really press Dani Olmo that much. Because if he simply goes with him too quickly, then a passing lane is very, very, very open into Eric Garcia, and that opens up spaces as well. So going back to the tactical board, this is the shape right here, right? Wing back midfielder is pressing the on-ball player. He's the second midfield player is dragged into wide positions. So this Mkhitaryan here, which is this defensive midfielder, let's highlight him very quickly. This midfield player is caught between 2 to 3 options. Am I gonna play this, or am I gonna press this extra player, or this extra player that's making that darting run, or do I just try and stand back so he doesn't play the switch? Now, this is the biggest issue with the 3-man midfield. Now, as I've said, the issue stems from 2 players pressing one on the ball player. This is basic of the ball or out of possession shape tactics. You are outnumbered when you have 2 players press 1 player. So it's a very simple basic mistake, but of course, as I've said, it stems from 2 things. It stems from this, in my opinion, poor pressing from the Inter, and as well the shape of Inter's midfield 3. Okay, so this is one example, of course. Let's continue the clip so we can see how it ended in the end. Of course, went in behind Mkhitaryan and they played through them. Okay, so this is a big issue. Going into the second clip. Now moving lower into this low block for Inter. It's another big problem for Inter. Now let's move into this clip. Left back plays the ball into Frankie de Jong, and you see, by having central quality in the middle of the pitch for Barcelona, Barella is dragged into this deeper position. Now, what does this leave Thuram to do actually is to drop into the midfield line or try to press, not press, or just drop into the midfield line to have some more numbers in this line. But at the end of the day, it's really simple to play through them. And this, in the end, ends in a shot for Pedri, which was very poor, but the idea stays the same. When playing with a midfield 3, you can pull them apart very easily. Now, I think a simple solution is, let's go into this situation from the tactical part. Okay, let's move into the back 3 and the wing back, the midfielders, and the forwards. In my opinion, now I think we've seen this with Amorim's Man United. We've seen it with a couple of teams too, but let's just speak about Inter here. when playing with a five at the back, you need your center backs to be aggressive. Now let's explain. This situation here that we've just mentioned is the left back popping up in this type of position, wing back here, midfield here. Now the thing is, you can't have these centre backs not be aggressive off the ball, because it leaves the midfielder or deeper midfielder to, as we've just mentioned in the clip, to drop into deeper positions too. Now, what is the solution? Is simply, if this ball is played into here, now all you have to do is have this centre back. You don't have to completely press the player or completely mark the player, but he has to know that when or if a ball is played into him, then he has to be aggressive on the ball and try to win the ball here. Now, if this occurs, this means that the centre backs are pressing those extra players in central positions, which leaves this defensive midfielder to be able to have the ability to press in higher positions, which means the Barcelona here, or PSG in the game on Saturday, is not going to have a numerical advantage in the middle of the park. So it does look simple, but of course it does leave a lot of risks to be taken, because when you leave these 1v1 situations, that means PSG could easily dribble past them and at the end create a goal scoring chance. But of course, that's the risk that you take in these big games. So this is the third situation that I want to talk about, which is of course the low block of Inter Milan. I think if they keep playing in that same manner, then PSG are going to have quite a couple of chances from these type of situations. And finally, going into the final clip. Pedri here has the ball, and you can see what dribblers or high technicians in the midfield does. It attracts players. You can see two players here of Barcelona attract 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, and you can see the gaps opening up for Barcelona here. And it's very, very simple with a couple of combinations or some dribbles that PSG are very similar to Barcelona in that sense, with Vitinha, João Neves or Fabian Ruiz. With a couple of dribblers, you can attract the Inter team to one side and play very, very simply to the other, switch to play on the other side. And of course, we know how good PSG are in 1v1 situations if they're isolated, from Farah to Dembele or Barcola to Dewey. They've got so many good 1v1 players that can beat their man in 1v1 situations. So, of course, as we've just mentioned a couple of minutes ago too, PSG do have their issues, but I think this is a much larger issue for Inter, and something that PSG could really exploit. And it could be a scenario that continues to happen, because I think PSG are going to be on the ball a lot, but it's going to be determined by the next couple of minutes that we're going to be talking about, which is going to be transitions. Transitions is where PSG could be wary of how they attack Inter in certain situations. So this is what we're going to be talking about. And before we talk about transitions in this game, which are going to be vital for both sides, of course, we're going to very briefly talk about set pieces, which I think it's an aspect that Inter could really exploit in this game. I think they do have, of course, an upper hand. It was very well known before the Arsenal game that PSG conceded 38% of their goals from set pieces, and it's not a coincidence that at the other end of the coin, Inter Milan are one of the best teams in regards to, of course, their physicality, but in regards to, of course, their set pieces as well. So we're gonna talk about two things here. First of all, their long throw-ins. Now, I I saw a pattern in the Barcelona game. Moving on to the clips very quickly, I saw a pattern that happened a couple of times. But I think it's very interesting. Now, when they do play those long balls, they form like a three or two man shape in and around the 18-yard box, and they don't win the first ball. I don't think their intention is to win the first ball from those long throw-ins. Their intention is to have the second balls drop into the path of those players forming around the 18-yard box to play snapshots. Now, what are snapshots? Snapshots are shots or finishes where you don't have to take an extra touch to finish your shot. No, you shoot right as the ball is coming near you. Now, as you see from this example here, long ball is played into or from Dumfries. They don't win the first ball, and Dumfries or Mkhitaryan, sorry, not Dumfries, Mkhitaryan doesn't take a touch. He shoots right away, and I think it was a lot more dangerous. The shot itself was a lot more dangerous than it first looked. Now, the second example shows a very similar shape. Now you see Calhanoglu, Mkhitaryan, and DeMarco shaping around this 18-yard box. A lot of the times when you see teams playing those long throw-ins, you see the other team or the on-the-ball team they crowd the in and around 6-yard box and try and win first or second balls in and around that area. So I think it's very unique how Inter use this situation, and you see again Dumfries plays that ball. They don't win the first ball, but the snapshot again, the ball drops right into the path of Calhanoglu, and he doesn't take touch. He shoots right away, and I think that catches the goalkeeper off guard. So for PSG, I think they have to be careful of this or these three players in and around the 18-yard box, because I think they are going to be very dangerous. Now, one more thing in regards to set pieces, a pattern that I think materialized a lot for or against PSG in their game against Arsenal, which were long balls. Most of the time when PSG played long balls, which happened a lot in that first leg at the Emirates, PSG, their sole intention in these second balls is not again winning the first ball, but having Fabian Ruiz in and around this area to win those second balls. But when they don't win that second ball, or when the ball does not drop into Fabian Ruiz's path, it drops into a Vitinha or a João Neves, who are of course very intense, very tenacious players, but in regards to long balls, when they face physicality, they are not that's not their strength. So that could lead to chances as well. And what Inter could look at when playing the long balls is very simply that second ball not dropping into Fabian Ruiz's path, because that's the only player that is very competent and able to win those second balls against a very physical midfield or very physical Inter team just in general. So I think these are two very important aspects that PSG need to be careful of, because in regards to set pieces and in regards to physicality, I think Inter have an upper hand, and you can see how when we talk about aspect to aspect, how even this game is. Although each team has their certain strengths and weaknesses, I think it just evens up this game even more. So now we move on to transitions that are going to be, I think, the most vital aspect, and something that will be detrimental to how this game is gonna end in the end. Moving on to transitions now, this is something or an aspect that could be determined, of course, by the game state, which is who scores first, how the game is going in general. However, we're going to be putting more focus on Inter Milan here with their attacking transitions and how possibly PSG could use those attacking transitions to their own advantage. Now, moving on to the clip right away, the ball right here, moving back a bit, is with Pedri. And you can see right away the shape of Inter Milan and how they are they are ready to once they win that ball back, they are very quick to transition with. You've got one, two, and you can say Dumfries with how high he is, although he is part of or should be part of that back five. You see how high he is and ready to transition if they win the ball, and they do win the ball. DeMarco or Mkhitaryan wins the ball first. DeMarco turns, and if you see here, DeMarco does not actually get his head up before making that pass. And why? Just very quickly, why does he not get his head up? It's drilled into those players where both those strikers are and how they can play off them when they don't have the ball. So as soon as they win the ball, DeMarco knows without looking where Thuram is going to be, and the ball is played into Thuram's path, who plays one touch, places it off his chest into Barella's path, and that pass is played into Dumfries, and he continues his attack, and you can see the amount of spaces that is presented. Now, it's really, really important to acknowledge how good Inter are in transitions, of course. However, we have to focus here on Dumfries. Now, you can say that Dumfries here is stopping a possible switch of play when he's off the ball, which is not a problem. However, what should be the case is maybe he's dropping into this into the 18-yard box to maybe close off an overload for Barcelona in that box. However, what makes Inter so unique is the fact that they use that risk to their advantage when they do transition attacking wise, and you have to say it works. And if Inter does what I was just saying, which is Dumfries is in a lower position, then he's not there when Mkhitaryan or Barella has the ball here. It does not work that way. So of course it's really important that Dumfries is in a high and wide position, or in a high position in general, for those quick transitions. Now this is the positive side of Inter's transitions. Moving on to a negative side. Now this is really interesting when I actually saw it. It was Barcelona's third goal, I think, if I remember correctly. Now, let's just make sure it's there. Yes, okay. The ball is on this left-hand side. Dumfries, as you see, is now inside his box, defending his box, and Inter win the ball. Now, as soon as Inter win the ball, Dumfries, again, is moving proactively, you can say, for if the ball is played in front, then he's ready to transition into a counter-attack. Now the problem is, if Inter, when they win the ball, lose it again on that opposite side, it leaves gaps. Now, when Barcelona win the ball again, you see here where Dumfries is, and he's not able to cover quickly enough before the pass is made. Of course, the first shot is saved. However, the issue is with Dumfries' positioning. Now, I'm not blaming Dumfries here, not by any stretch. This is a systematical issue, because very simply, Dumfries has to be in this type of position to be proactive. So they have numbers. So Inter actually has numbers if they counterattack. So Dumfries, if he's there and that ball is played into, I think this is Taremi now, then you've got Taremi, Thuram, Dumfries, and that extra midfielder starting or beginning this counterattack. If he's not there, then it's a 3v3 or a 4v3 for Barcelona's advantage. So Dumfries has to be there, but this is something that could be exploited by PSG, which is as soon as they lose the ball, they try and win the ball back and play to the opposite wing back. I think it's a something that could be used by PSG, and it's really interesting how you could use such a big strength for one team and just these little minor details exploit it. And in those big games, a goal could be scored in any of the like 4 or 5 aspects that we've talked about in this video. The game in the end could be scored by one goal. I think if I remember correctly, Inter lost their final. Inter lost the final against Man City. I think it was 2 years ago by one goal through one weakness that they had. They concede in and around the box through a cutback, and that is how they conceded it in the end and lost the Champions League final. So these type of games, these massive games, could be determined by one little mistake, and this is something that could be for the advantage of PSG, and they are very well known, PSG, as well, for their counter pressing. What is counter pressing very quickly is if they lose the ball, they try and win it very, very quickly as soon as possible. They surround the opposing team with players to try and win the ball back. So I think it's actually suits their own style and how they can use this against Inter. One more thing that I want to talk about for Inter's sake is their back post defending. Now, this is something that caught my eye against Barcelona too. I think Barcelona exploited so many different problems and issues for Inter's both mid to low block and showed that they do have a lot of glaring issues. Now, back post defending is something that I did not expect for it to be an issue for Inter. However, I think it's a problem with back post defending, but it's an issue with box defending in general. They are not the best team in regards to defending their own box. Now, in this clip, you can see Martin, I think, the left back for Barcelona, crosses the ball first of all with a cutback, but it's blocked by Bisek. And the second ball, however, you can see 8 defenders for Inter, and you've got 7 attackers for Barcelona inside the box. So Inter should have a numerical advantage. However, the ball is played into the path of Eric Garcia, and he's left open. Now, it's an issue. And when we go into the second example, De Jong has the ball, turns, Martin has so much space, and you see the numerical advantage of Inter. You've got in that back post area, it should be a 3v1. If you can see here where my arrow is, you've got, I'm not sure who this is, I think this is Mkhitaryan and Varela against this player that actually finds the back of the net. I think it's Dani Olmo, finds the back of the net at the end of this clip. The ball is played into his path, and you can see they have got a lot of issues. This is not even an issue, a systematical issue. This is just dealing with very simple crosses, and I think this is Rafinha dragging the central centre back out of position, and neither Barella or Mkhitaryan following the extra man on the back post. So this is a very big issue. I think, of course, box defending is an issue here, but another issue here, of course, is the fact that Dumfries is very slow to try and mark or press Martin, which leaves him with the amount of space that he has to make the cross. And if they do give that same amount of space to either of the PSG fullbacks with Hakimi or Nuno Mendes, they are very able to provide with quality crosses inside the box. They don't need very highly physical players in and around the box. All they need is the ability to use this issue of Inter's back post defending to their own advantage. Now, this is something again that goes into PSG's favor. Now, I'm not one to predict this game, of course, because we've seen how close this game is with the amount of details we talked about. Just something to note, of course, Inter has lost the Scudetto in the final day against Napoli. It was very close, of course. They only lost out by 1 point. However, this could be something to work with Inter. Of course, their morale could be quite low in those first couple of days of losing it. However, they are going to be on a very different level mentally when they were very, very close of completing a treble to maybe not even, possibly not even winning a single trophy this season. While the other side of the coin, PSG are on the verge of completing a treble if they do win the Champions League, winning of course the league and beating Reims in the cup. I think it's the Coupe de France. I think that was last week. They beat them 3-0. So they are on the verge of winning a treble. Now psychologically, of course, PSG are on the highest of highs, while Inter are on the lowest of lows. So I think this could be used for Inter's sake, actually, to possibly have a bit that extra incentive of trying to win this final, because it may mean a lot more for Inter's sake. Of course, they just lost out of the Champions League final or the Champions League trophy 2 years ago, as we've just mentioned, against Man City. PSG, of course, followed that same path a couple of years back against Bayern Munich. I think it was 2021. So they are very similar nearly in every single aspect, even when it comes to certain psychological factors too. So I'm not one to really predict. However, what I'm gonna say is, if all that PSG need to really gain an advantage throughout the game is to not concede first. If they concede first, then Inter is gonna be quite a big problem. Not in regards to, as we've just mentioned, they do have a lot of defensive problems, but their attacking transitions are a big problem when or if they score first. So PSG need to not score or concede first, sorry, and then use those details that we've just talked about before to their own advantage, because Inter defensively are not the best, and maybe. In my opinion, we can have a high scoring game if Inter do score first too. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting game, tactically and mentally, and I'm really excited to watch this game. So this is the end of the video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you do have any comments on what we've just talked about, please put it down below, or any suggestions. Please put it down below too. Thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you guys very soon.